Evening, everyone. I'm Lucy Gray, and I'm the co-founder of the Global Education Conference, and we're happy that you are joining us this evening, or whatever time it is, whatever time zone you're in around the world. I'm in Chicago, Illinois, and it's 9 o'clock in the evening, and it's Sunday, if that helps, and the weather's a cool, probably 30 to 40 degrees right now. So we'll all get to introduce ourselves in a minute like that, but I want to introduce to you quickly Tosca Killoran. Am I saying your name correctly, Tosca?
Killoran, yeah. Tosca Killoran.
Killoran, now I know. And Tosca and I have been Facebook friends for a while, and I've always admired her work, and she's part of a crew of ed tech innovators in the Asian, particularly Asian, but not all, international school set that I've had some interaction with over the years. And Tosca, most of your friends seem to me to be like the most innovative, hip ed tech people out there. And it's always a joy to see what you guys are up to. And I saw that you posted something, I think it was about a TEDx in service learning or something a while ago, and I'm like, we need to have her talk about this at the Global Ed Conference. And so we're so thrilled to have you tonight.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here again. I love it. I love this conference.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you. You presented before. What did you present before? Do you recall?
Oh, we were talking about how to create a TEDx event at your school for youth change makers, basically. It was Jeff and I in about 2012, I think.
Okay, so that was a while ago. Okay, great. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, I'm going to switch through this and just kind of thank our sponsors for making this happen. We are very grateful to DIF, International Education, Google, TES, Iron USA, and a slew of others that have supported our work. If you all haven't seen Chrome Warrior yet, they have set up a gamified learning experience for us with the conference. And I'll put the link into the chat once we get going. But they are sponsoring us through the creation of this really cool game called GEC Connect. And you can do all sorts of challenges, including listen to this keynote, and earn points. And I will point you in the right direction for that once Tosca gets started. So I just want to say thank you to our sponsors and supporters. We couldn't do this without you. The next activity that we're going to do is we will have everybody introduce themselves through our map. And you should have whiteboard privileges now, which means that you can use the tools to the left-hand side of the map here to mark where you are on the map. So double-click on a star or whatever icon you want to use and approximately where you are in the world tonight, and that will give Tosca an idea. I can't even put mine in for some reason. Hey, there we go. And that will tell us where we're all coming. Look at this. This is interesting. Mostly U.S. it looks like right now, in Canada. And then we have somebody. That's great. That's great. All right, so hopefully some more people will drift in. In the chat, if everybody could also type in where you are exactly, like your city and country, that would be great too, and what time it is and the weather. That kind of gives us a sense of what's going on in the world today. So I'm in Northbrook, Illinois, which is just outside Chicago, and it's a little chilly outside. My family, this is a really strange story, but my family, for my son's 8th grade birthday party, we set up a tent in the backyard and the boys slept out there last weekend. And my husband has really enjoyed camping out there. He's been going out there every night and camping for like the last week. And so I'm waiting for him to go camp out in our backyard. 37 degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit, right? Ooh, and Molly from Massachusetts is seeing a supermoon. I'm going to have to go look and see if we have that out there now.
Wow.
Yeah. We might be Celsius one day, too, eventually. And then we have Hawaii. No snow in Breckenridge. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to turn this over to Tosca and let her, I'm going to take away the whiteboard privileges if everybody's okay with that. And move on and let Tosca start her presentation so that she has as much time as possible. Please use the chat to ask questions, and I will make note of them and get them to Tosca at the end or whenever Tosca is ready. And feel free to interact and share resources as we go along. Thanks a lot for coming, everyone.
Yeah, I want to say thank you too. I know it's late in North America, and so thanks for joining. And right now, currently, I'm in the makerspace in NIST International School, so you might hear bells or you might have kids running around. I will put on video for the first little bit just so you get a sense of the space, and then I might turn it off if it gets a little choppy, and then turn it back on when we do a little tour of the space if you guys want to. So again, welcome, and thanks for coming to chill with me for a little bit and have a conversation about makerspaces and service learning, and eventually maybe TEDx, we can work that in too. So one of the things that I'm really excited about is, well, actually, let me start from the beginning. You know, I think sometimes in ed tech we have a lot of people selling us ideas, and so what I want to do with you guys is kind of go on a journey. I'm going to tell you 3 stories, and I'm not going to sell you on anything. And hopefully at the end of those 3 stories, you have kind of an inspiration or a shift in your thinking, and then you can maybe apply or use the pedagogy in some way. So this is an odd picture to start with, but I think it goes way back to when I was a child. Growing up in Canada, I had a father who was a biologist chemist, and he was, you know, always kind of a maverick in the township because everybody else had these perfectly manicured lawns and perfectly beautiful backyards with gorgeous gardens, and ours was just a ragged indigenous species lawn that sloped down to a forest. And right at the edge of our yard to the forest, my father had built a giant compost heap. And basically, the compost heap was not one of the nice new compost heap where it's contained in a plastic thing and you rotate it once in a while. Nope, this was an old-fashioned pit of refuse, basically. And my parents also had another idea about learning, which was to leave us alone for long periods of time. And my father had built our house, and he had left all of the building materials underneath our deck. So we had availability of nails and wood and screws and screwdrivers, and the only rule was that we couldn't use the miter saw because it might cut our arm off. So every summer we made things out in the forest and different kinds of playhouses, etc. And one hot summer day we decided that we were going to make a slip and slide. I don't know if you guys know what slip and slides are. I think most of you are from the United States, so you might be right around my age also. I'm 41. So a slip and slide is a long piece of plastic. You put some sort of lubricant on it, and you put water on it, and you slide, and you have tons of fun. So we took out 50 meters of polyurethane from my dad's stash, and we decided, well, you know, if we put a little bit of soap on it, it'll be good. But if we put the whole bottle of soap on it, we can go super fast. So we set it up, and we used our guinea pig, as all families have a guinea pig, my little brother, the youngest one, and we told him, Matthew, take a running jump for it and go head first down the slide. And so he did. He slid down the 50 meters of polyurethane, he slid across the grass, and he slid head first into the compost pile. And he got up, and he was covered in little bits of lettuce and maggots and flies buzzing around him, and he was crying. And of course, we were laughing hysterically. And we got him up, and we hosed him down, and we moved the slip and slide 10 meters, and we continued with our summer fun. We learned from our failure. when my dad and my parents came home, we thought for sure, all of us older kids thought we were dead meat. You know, Matthew's going to tell on us, we ruined part of the lawn, you know. And what my dad said was, you should have charged every kid in the neighborhood a nickel, and you would have made enough money to pay for the soap. And it was the first moment in my life where I kind of went, oh, he didn't tell us off. He didn't give us any kind of feedback as far as our making. What he did was give us a suggestion of how we could have become entrepreneurs, basically. So that's my first story for you. And I want you to kind of reflect as I'm talking on the kind of attributes that my dad did to set us up for success and for my life as a maker and a design thinker. So the other day I was in a coaching conversation with a teacher, and the teacher said to me, Tosca, I feel like a dinosaur. I feel like the rapid advance of education and technology is making it impossible for me to have agency and to know what's going on within the education technology world and to successfully integrate it into my classroom every day. And I was really thinking about this, and actually this was an animation, and it's a Tyrannosaurus Rex who's skipping rope. But the animations don't work in Blackboard, so you just have to imagine it. But I know you all have great imagination, so it's fine. You know, and that's true, actually. We're teaching children for jobs that don't even exist. There is a rapid advance in education technology, and that's a pretty scary stat up there that I've given, which is 47% of occupations could disappear in the next 30 years. You know, but part of the kind of, let's take that data and let's put it into kind of real terms. So for instance, this is a Winsun Corporation in China that has basically 3D printed these houses for under $5,000 US. So everybody out there in our computer and digital family right now should be going, what? They 3D printed houses for $5,000? That's amazing. And this gives us an insight with VR and AR of, you know, what we're kind of looking forward to in the future, which is exciting. And Risa said, you know, people taught us for jobs that didn't necessarily exist too. I totally agree. And what we're doing with technology, though, is kind of breaking into the fourth industrial revolution, you know, where we're seeing new jobs that, that our students need different kinds of skills for. I think one of the ways that we can leverage spaces to develop those skills and to give teachers a sense of agency over that technology is through maker spaces. You know, and so the development of space. But beyond that, I think it's much more about maker mindset and design thinking mindset. So I'm going to go through a couple stories about how we've done that at NIST. You know, at NIST, right behind me, you can see what's basically on the screen, which is the makerspace that I designed and set up at NIST International School. And when I came, it was an old computer lab. And we emptied it and put in movable tables that you can see, a Lego green screen area, all kinds of stuff. But how do you turn it from this kind of dead space to this, which is active and alive and full of kids that are making and having agency and independence in their learning? You know, a big part of that, you know, is a question of how now we have the space, we have the what, now how do we do it? And when I first started, I thought, well, if I simply provide white space and open opportunities for students to explore and experiment and design, they'll just make cool stuff. And what we found was that, yeah, the kids came in, but I had 40 to 50 children in here who all needed just-in-time support with skill development because a lot of them didn't even know how to sew on a button. I might be speaking from a different paradigm here in international schools, but a lot of our schools in the demographic here in the international world, especially in Asia Pacific, are exceptionally privileged children. And so they might have had a nanny or a maid who have taken care of them for a long period of time, so they don't have a lot of the skills that maybe I grew up with or you grew up with, how to saw something, how to sew on a button, etc. And so that just-in-time support became overwhelming for me to make sure that kids were safe and that they were taken care of and that they were developing skills and attitudes and aptitudes within the makerspace. And so I went away for the summer, and I thought a lot about our space, and I thought a lot about how to make it more successful. And I had the opportunity to go to TED Summit and this summer in Banff, back home. And it was really interesting because we talked a lot about Daniel Pink's idea of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I got to meet him and talk to him about this idea. And I thought, we've given the kids autonomy, white space, we've tried skill development with them, but we really have not given them a sense of purpose in this development of the space. And so what I thought was, I wonder if we couldn't infuse all of these silos of learning that we have around our schools, like TEDx, service learning, makerspace, infuse them into one kind of hub where the makerspace becomes the realm that we make for all of those things. But how do you give kids, especially in our context, a sense of purpose when they've basically been catered to? And so what you do is you take them out of their context. So what we did was we asked our older students to come to Omgoi, Thailand, which is one of the most impoverished regions in Thailand, but who produce coffee. And we asked them to do well, actually, I'll show you some of the kids that came with us. Here's some of the students. And these were kids who already were involved somewhat in service, but certainly were new to this region and to the coffee region in Thailand. And we asked them to go into the village with very little expectations of what they would do or any links to curriculum, but we said, do a needs analysis and have a conversation and listen to the locals at that region. We worked with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and talked to the locals of the region and found out what their needs were, what they wanted to improve for their lives, and how that met with the Sustainable Development Goals. And then we gave them cameras, and we had them document their time at the village, and we took away quite a few different ideas of what was important to our learners than through our lens. What I would have photographed or what I would have thought teenagers would have photographed was very different than what ended up being on those rolls. So this is a few examples of what our students were capturing. These are all photos taken by students. Like, how amazing is that, right? So at the end of it, we kind of talked to them, and we talked to them about what was important to them. And they came away with this very clear understanding that they wanted to inspire younger learners at our school with what they were doing in Thailand and what they had decided and made agreements with the Omgoi people. So I'll give you a little bit of backstory about that coffee before I move on to how they empowered our younger learners. So the village is called Merrimit, and basically what we've done is we've worked with those coffee producers for fair trade, and then we've asked our students to help them by taking their coffee, roasting it, and then distributing it in Bangkok, including at our school. Our school has 3 different coffee shops for parents to come and hang out in and visit with each other, because, as you know, in international schools, we're small communities that are away from our homes. So we develop a very tight-knit group on campus. And then we basically distribute those to different Bangkok coffee shops, gather funds. It's a social entrepreneur development project. So proceeds go back to designing and bagging more coffee and purchasing more coffee, but also to the farmers in the region. Does that make sense? Everybody got that? So Fairness, was the coffee brand that the kids came up with, which is basically a play on fair trade, and NIST is the name of our school, and so the brand of coffee is actually Fairness. Yeah, Brad's got it. Okay. So then we wanted to shift students from being passive consumers of information to active creators and innovators. We wanted them to have power in this process of design and how to meet the needs of the people. Yeah, and Lucy's asking if you guys are familiar with the SDGs, and I can definitely go into that during our question and answer a little bit more about that. So what we did was we got our kids to come back, the older kids, and to work with our younger students to design potential solutions for display racks or baggage, like for logos and all kinds of stuff that we need in order to have different pop-up shops. We went through many iterations and many failures for our students where they realized, oh, we probably shouldn't have them in glass jars, we probably should have them in paper bags. How can we design that? And we asked the students to create things that could be put into different pop-up shops around the city and different places that they could be showcased. So this was at TEDx last year, and then this was a pop-up shop just in the front of our school for parents coming in the morning. And then we took that money that we have raised, or the proceeds from all of that, and we went back to the Ongoy region and worked with that village in order to build a water tower or a water tank for them. They had no running water in the village, and so that's what they had said was their main priority as a village, is to have sanitation and water. And so the kids went out, and the older students actually built the water tower or water tank for them, from start all the way to decorative finishing put on the tank. And then we asked them to share their story on the TEDx stage. So it came full circle from, just introducing them to an idea, having it linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, having them listen and develop empathy, which is part of the design thinking process, going through many iterations and failures within the makerspace, and then coming to fruition at the end with being able to share it on a global platform. The feedback from the school was, how are you anchoring this in curriculum, though? Of course. And so what we did was we started, this is a book that I wrote a few years ago for Action, and what we've done is ask the kids to actually go through the design thinking process and action in our school by anchoring it with this text and with action journals where they actually go through the steps of, how can we use design thinking or to identify problems within communities. This is good for younger learners. We got to kind of go around all of that with our first group because we just took them to the region and they had to sit down and they listened. And they talk to the elders and the people within the community. And of course, we ask students to write their own books and to actually publish them, and so that they share their story from a youth lens, So focusing on those soft skills of becoming rather than learning content. Those are 2 useful links that might help you, is helptakeaction.com, which is created by myself for teachers to augment action or service learning. opportunities, and education.ca, which is my company, which you can buy those books. That's my only plug. So how does this trickle out throughout our curriculum, or is it just a standoff, like one-time thing? What's ended up happening is those kids talk a lot. And so they got really excited, and our Year 5 students had some friends in Year 12, or brothers or sisters, and asked them to come and talk to our students about Ocean Marine Guardians, which is a short called OMG. Oh my God. And they came into our makerspace and taught the students about the artificial reef that they've been working on in Thailand. You may not know that Thailand's reefs are threatened because of tourism. And so many of the reefs are bleached or dying. And so our school has decided, or one of the service learning groups has decided to repropagate that reef through creation of our artificial reef. So what we did was kind of an explicit kind of service model where we taught the kids about how to go through that service mindedness, service learning mindedness. And so we taught them how to make the artificial reef. They made the actual reef blocks in the makerspace with the older students. You can, I love that picture because that smile says a lot. And then we connected it to the real world. So we got out of our space and we actually asked them to take those blocks and plant little bits of coral that is living, that's been fallen off and broken on the ocean floor. The older kids dive in, they come up, and they plant in the artificial reef that the little kids have created and set, and then the older kids dive down and actually propagate the artificial reef floor and collect data on the impact that we're making over time. So kids who are here can get online and see the success that they've had or the impact that they have had over time. While they're doing that, the little kids go and do a beach cleanup. And they collect all these PVC bottles that that are littered on Thai beaches. And then we bring them back to the makerspace and use design thinking to think about how we can turn these into products for maker fairs and ask the students to sell those to fund more artificial reefs, and it becomes a social entrepreneurship project again. So the makerspace does not just become this empty white space time, which we still have during lunch times for kids to come in and experience the makerspace like that. But it is more purpose-driven within our curriculum. Why are we in here, and who are we designing for, and what is our thought process behind that? You can see some of the products that they've created is, one of these little boys taking a piece of plastic bottle, and he's actually sewing in one of the animals that he saw in the ocean. And another one is taping the PVC bottle to hopefully make a little pen holder. These are pretty easy, easy solutions. So I have a couple questions on the side that I'm going to respond to now because I think they're good. And it says, how often do students go to the makerspace? Do you have a class? Is it an after school? How do you communicate with former teachers to coordinate all this? So these are like super good, and I can address them right now. So kids go to the makerspace. We run a PYP curriculum, and so what I do is I sit in planning meetings as a makerspace coordinator and design thinking coordinator, and I sit in the planning sessions and find units of inquiry where there's an authentic link. So not every class is in here doing this at the same time. And I don't have a class. I model for teachers. I get alongside teachers. I'm a coach. That being said, some teachers are super uncomfortable. They don't know anything. They don't know how to sew a button. So at those times, I help those teachers and support them, and I actually am the teacher in the class. Do we have an after school? Currently, right now, we are working with many of our parents are UN affiliated, and so they've asked to come and support us in this space and set up social entrepreneurial classes for kids. And so we're going to open it up in the evenings later, probably this year, for parent-run workshops, which is pretty cool. I'm excited. And how do you communicate with teachers to coordinate all this? Oh, it's always a tricky thing, isn't it? Communication in schools is hard. Mostly I do a lot of legwork as a coach. I walk around, I talk to people, I see what they're interested in, I go across schools, I find out about service. You know, I sit down at lunch and before school and talk to people, and I'm in those planning sessions. And, you know, at the end, this picture is taken from Brazil, but it was an art piece. But basically, I use it for kids, and I show it to them for possibilities. What could we create from what we upcycle or recycle? And I think that the possibilities are really limitless, especially when we give them to students and we give them the skills and the time and the opportunities to make and develop a maker mindset. So I think these are the kind of 10 things that I learned over my 2.5 years through this process, which was, you know, that the school and the parents have an expectation that we anchor in skill development in our curriculum, and that we actually do provide white spaces for people. Some of the ways that we've been the most successful, like I said before, was getting our older students to come in and talk to our younger students. And by getting the teachers within the space, it really has developed their agency. All of the things that I've talked about have been very low tech, but we still have a 3D printer. We have Dash and Dot. We have Edison robots. You know, I can take us on a short tour of what I was doing with the kids this morning, and it ranges from makey to making jewelry and to do, you know, Lego animation, stop motion animation. I think it's mostly about asking kids to use that mindset to then say, okay, we've developed this wreath or we've designed this coffee bag. What ways could we use technology to make this even more augmented or better or different, or does it matter? You know, asking kids to just start to try that on. Identifying purpose. Why are we here? Why are we doing the maker space? And to honor the lens of the learner, to listen to them also. We've also leveraged parent bodies, like I said, who are very successful and who have a lot of knowledge, who might be carpenters, or we had an electrician last year who came in and taught all about you know, circuitry to our students. And also the idea that we have to believe that our kids can make big changes in the world and that they actually are change agents. And one of the things that I talked about right at the very beginning was that idea of celebrating failure. They made lots of wreaths that were not great. You know, we had pH wrong, and, you know, the expert in the field told us that we would have killed the wreath entirely because our pH was off. So there was lots of opportunities for failure and redesign. I'm going to just quickly look through the questions. And if Lucy wants to kind of talk to me too, I kept this quite short and sweet in a lot of ways because I knew that you guys would have a lot of questions about your own context and how we can make this happen in public education or in schools that aren't so well funded. And so I can offer some suggestions for you, some ideas. Certainly I want to go back to that very first slide and that idea of my dad and what kind of opportunities he gave me. I hope you have some in your own, you know, mind, and maybe you can write it in the chat, which are some of the kind of qualities or attitudes and attributes that my dad enabled me to basically develop as a child towards a maker mindset. If we can identify these, then we basically have, you know, the potential for us to. Oh, Lucy.
Yeah, I have a question. If anybody wants to talk and grab the mic, you're more than welcome to, or you can type in the chat. That's fine as well. But I'm really curious about how you designed that space with kids' needs in mind, and how and that process, because that seems to be kind of like the magnet for everything else. If you have a good space that's designed well, it will lead to other interesting things. So how did that start?
Well, actually, when I have to totally admit, when I came to coaching at NIST, I was new to coaching. That's only 2 years and 3 months ago. I was an UI teacher for 14 years in the PYP. I'm early years trained. Part of that is a blessing because if you guys are familiar with UI teaching, a lot of us teach from pods or from, small groups. Our classrooms are very responsive. We set up kind of provocations to get kids interested. And so when I looked at this space, I kind of designed it with that UI classroom in mind. So I can do a little tour of the makerspace. And essentially what we did was we looked at tables that were adjustable for different children's heights. We had whiteboards that are on rollers so that they're movable. We created a tool wall where very sharp things can be up high, where teachers have to access them, but other things like hammers, etc., can be down low for smaller students. And then you probably see there's our 3D printer. You can see the kids were working on Edison robots. Over on that very far wall right there are our Minecraft stations, and you can see the tables are adjustable, so you can move them up and down for short kids or tall kids. And then right over here, you can probably see that I've created these lower carts that are actually on rollers. So the kids can roll them out, put them in the hallway, pull out the buckets that are all labeled, and get at anything at their level. So really, I was thinking about not a DT lab, but an owned and shared space by kids. Does that answer your question, Lucy? Oh, I forgot to show you our Lego table, which I'm talking from. So we designed this Lego table too, which is kind of cool. It's a whole tabletop and enables kids to use stop motion animation. Was that good, Lucy? Okay, so Daniel asked, are all kids in your school participating in this lab every year, or what percent? So, Nanjing International School, my friend John Rinkert, who's amazing, he actually runs a design class. He is a design teacher, and their schools got on board with having design thinking as an actual class. For us, it's way more malleable because we are NIST is kind of on the cutting edge of even breaking the rules with the PYP. We are moving towards personalized and individualized learning in the truest sense, where kids are directing their own inquiry. So a lot of it is me working with specific groups and pockets of students. What I'd like it to see is to become so infused within our curriculum that this space doesn't need me. I'd like to work myself out of a job where teachers feel agency in this space, where they can pull their kids out, book the makerspace is just an extension of their teaching practice. So what is your youngest child using the makerspace? So we're year 2, which is your grade 1. The younger kids, our EY learners, and our year 1 students, which is your kindergarten, have their own kind of Reggio-inspired atelier over in the early years building, which has, it doesn't look like this, but has pretty much all the same stuff. And I agree, Lucy said design is part of the IB. Absolutely, design thinking is. I think the way that we unpack it for teachers with actually using design thinking model is a little bit different. Youngest, did I answer your question, Brad? Youngest group in this space is year 2, and that's your grade 1. Are there any other questions about the space or how to infuse this into public education? Because I can speak to that a little bit. I've done quite a bit of work with consulting with American schools and Canadian schools on design thinking makerspace. Thanks, Peggy. So nothing that I have developed in a school, but certainly what I've been working towards. And what I'm sorry for those of you who are just listening, Brad asked something you've developed. So no, as a consultant, mostly I work with schools and ask about their needs and do a needs analysis. Where are their teachers at in their thinking? How much budget do they have? What's the mindset and that shifting that culture of thinking? Somebody said it earlier that it's actually not about the space, but actually about shifting the culture of thinking, and I totally agree with that. It's been the hardest thing actually through this process is to have us look at not just coaches, digital learning coaches as not as tech support, but also as the makerspace and service learning as not standalone, but as something that we actually infuse within our kids every single day. Yeah, standardized, sorry to be command, oh, you're not. Totally. This is an open conversation. This is why I love this conference, because it's educators talking to other educators. Yeah, I think that it would be really cool to build a space in your school and to see what happens. You know, I think the more agency, the reflection I have is that I came to the school, I came to NIST, and the principal at the time, Brett, said, build us a makerspace. And I was like, okay, and I screwed up. And the reason I screwed up is because I didn't involve teachers, and I didn't create a group or, you know, I don't know what you want to call it, a committee of people that could take shared ownership. And so for the first whole year, this was Tosca's space. And I had to really break that down this year, and it was really hard to overcome that failure of mine. But I admit to it. I just was eager to please, and I steamrolled ahead, and I made the space. And now, looking back on it, if you are thinking of making a makerspace, my suggestion is to get as many people and stakeholders, including parents, involved in that process. Yeah. Okay. So, is there a way to integrate this into a more classic public school setting? How do you get away from the standardized testing? So, even in you know, we can have big, long talks about standardized testing. But I think that one of the ways that I have seen it successful is to have a maker cart. And so even schools, even if you don't have a classroom with this, if you can set aside part of your budget for your classroom budget for a maker station or a maker cart, and then ask kids when they are designing, let's say they are working on a language activity, and they're designing a game, and they're using a very traditional kind of words their way resource. You know, asking them to go through the design thinking process when they're designing a game, and then to create cards using the maker card, that's a form of making, you know? So we're really awesomely resourced, and we have this big space. But I really think it is about mindset and how we develop that inquiry and student agency in our learners. Yeah, I agree with Peggy, totally. I think it's much less about the space and much more about the space in between our ears, you know. I'm trying to, thanks Brad, I'd love to see your makerspace. Lucy, did I miss any questions there that I should go back and
I don't think so. I think the big overlying question that a lot of this relates to is, you know, how do we incorporate this into schools that are not so flexible, who are not necessarily so child-centered? That's kind of the drift I'm getting, and I think my comment was, I think there's some parts of the U.S. where maker spaces happen regardless of school. They're more community spaces than school spaces, and I think that might be the way to go. You know, as a parent, if you're looking for your kid to be part of a maker kind of environment. But you know, where I am, where my kids go to school, it's seen as a 6-week course. It's not a course, and it shouldn't be just for 6 weeks. It should be all the time, right? And getting people to not be wedded to the schedule and that sort of thing is really difficult. I guess my question for you too, on top of all that, is, your administrator bought into it, but when you're doing consulting or working with a school that doesn't know what they don't know, how do you get administrators to buy into this as well? I'd be curious about that.
That's a really good question. I think what I do is I do what we do with teachers, and when we're asking teachers to shift mindset. And a big part of that is to identify their belief systems about learning. That question about what is school and what is learning is really imperative for schools to be able to identify and speak to. If learning is rote memorization and standardization, which I actually don't believe any educator, even stuck in a school that maybe focuses on that, I don't think that any educator actually thinks like that, who works with kids. So, I mean, for me, when I sit down with those leadership teams and I say, what do you want your kids to leave every day with? Like, what is it that makes a successful learner at your school? And some people will talk about the test or the test scores or getting kids into universities. And right there, I know that I'm going to have to take a different approach than teachers or leadership that's like, we want our kids to be happy and we want them to develop good characters and we want them to have well-rounded whole child education. That takes something different. I can anchor those people who are on that cusp or those early adopters into, or at least, average adopters, at least have them sit down with anchor texts and look at the maker movement and how it is shifting cultures of thinking and the successes that it's having. With those people who are not resistant, those people, all they need is this is how you could do it. This is how we could work together. Let's look at your curriculum and find ways to infuse it. And they're like, whoa, okay. It's the resistant people that you have to really, it's a bigger issue. It's about asking them, what is learning? And what is school? What does that look like? Are we right? And if we're not right, then what do we do as a leadership team to redefine that? And that's hard. And I feel for people in those circumstances because I've been in schools like that too. I think, what else? Oh, somebody's from Kelowna. That's where my company is. Yay! Canadians in the house. Oh, and I'm sorry, Lucy, you asked me something else, which was...
I was more just ranting about, how you fit into a school that, is not that flexible, I guess. And, I mean, I don't think there is a set answer, but as somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, a lot of this is about a mindset. It's not about the stuff, and the stuff can come in bits and pieces, and actually it's probably pretty cheap, if you're really creative about it, right?
Yeah, I do. Most of my stuff comes from donations, like toilet paper rolls, And I heard somebody came to a workshop in China the other week, and they were like, oh, we're not allowed to collect toilet paper rolls in the United States anymore for kids to use. And I was like, what? So I don't know. You have to talk to your leadership about what you can do, but definitely leverage the trash that's happening and being generated in schools, because that is something that actually is our major resources, is recyclable. I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about the makerspace movement that's happening in public libraries around the United States right now. And I don't know if that's just out of the blue. I was thinking, I wonder if those libraries, public libraries are struggling. And, part of the reason of infusing the makerspace into public libraries was to regenerate those spaces. And I wonder if they wouldn't set up a partnership, if you have a school in the district, where they could actually just come in and showcase what they're doing within their libraries. And that provides an opportunity for your school to have a partnership with the library, with a public library. And also for, those, for the kids get the experience to play with things that they might not have access to normally, like making Makeys or Edison robots, etc. And that might be a great way for them to actually access them. I have a friend who teaches in Edmonton Catholic school system, because I'm originally from Edmonton, and she has one Makey in her classroom, and there's one in the whole school, and she purchased it. You know, they still have computer labs, and they're still working in context where she says, how am I supposed to do this, Tosca? And the truth is, each one of our contexts is so unique. It really is about our mindset and shifting our mindset and not looking at the space or the stuff. You know, how can we give our kids autonomy, mastery, and purpose in what they do, or at least in more of what they do?
I think the thing I think about too is also human capital. I'm going to put a link in of this one project I did a little teeny bit of work with. It was a partnership between Columbia Colleges here in Chicago, their community arts outreach program in Chicago Public Schools, and they used it was an I3 grant through the U.S. government and the Department of Education, and they built digital maker spaces that they called digital ateliers in the libraries of a high school and an elementary school, and they were big, huge libraries that were really underutilized. And it's a little different take on a traditional maker space because it's about digital making mostly. But you guys might be interested in that. The other thing I want to make sure that we talked about too was the Sustainable Development Goals. And one thing that all of you might be interested in is, I'll let Tosca explain it, but there's another model of project-based learning that was developed through Apple, and they've recently kind of handed it over to an organization called Digital Promise, and that's called challenge-based learning. And one of their representatives is doing another session, I think Tuesday, I can't remember, his name is Mark Nichols, on challenge-based learning, and they're focusing on the SDGs, just FYI. So it's very similar to all this. So I'll shut up and let you finish up.
Yeah, well, I think the SDGs are just a framework that the UN has put in that basically says these are the goals that we want to improve and make changes on our planet and in human and animal and just our populations, you know. And they've identified those goals, and so to anchor what we do in those goals actually is, we know, somehow contributing to the planet. One of the things that I think is really important that we kind of started to migrate away from and go towards spaces and stuff, but what I'm really trying to advocate for is more just a purpose-driven makerspace. So when kids are designing, they're facing real-world challenges in their lives every day. And I know you probably are teaching in schools that might have food at-risk kids or low-income students or students with needs. And these are the kids that they should be designing for. And so looking at those opportunities of what our students are actually grappling with in their world as opportunities for them to put on their designer's hat, their engineer's hat, and actually solve those real-world problems. At least create prototypes for them. If you can anchor those in the SDGs, then you have the ability to kind of go to your leadership and actually kind of validate what you're doing. The Sustainable Development Goals, Lucy put up in the link in the chat, and I think that they are so extensive and large that they're right now, you know, I could talk about those for a whole hour too. I will say this, I just started last week, I had a Maasai tribe that I visited in 2012 reach out to me and ask me if I would design a curriculum for 100 students in a one-room schoolhouse. And I talked to Tom Fullerton at McGill University and created a website, and I had big plans. And he's done this with the Indigenous peoples up in the north of Canada to create a blended ed environment with focuses on social entrepreneurship, makerspaces, etc. And he told me something that was amazing. He was like, unless you listen and you take the time to listen to people and develop empathy for what they actually need, You can't go in and design anything. And I think that's where it really has to start with, is listening and building our, giving kids a sense of purpose from what drives them and what their passions are. How do you fund work with Indigenous people or people with no funds? It's a good question. How do you? A big part of it is partnerships with other social entrepreneur groups, leveraging communities like public libraries, etc. Like all the ways that teachers have for so many years been very clever in how we make our classrooms run. And we just have to put on our own designer hats and be clever about it. So if there's anything else, because I'm just cognizant of our time, and I know my presentation was only about 35 minutes, but I really did want to be able to address any of your concerns this time. Last time I did this, I talked for an hour, and the questions were so, I didn't get to anybody. So I think that if I can get you guys to walk away with anything, it's also to utilize the people and make partnerships with, my context is different, but I am willing to help and coach and be there for you and talk to you and design with you and find ways around our tricky leadership and to make changes. I'm doing my doctoral work out of the University of East Carolina. I value American public school. I value charter schools. I value education. So leverage the people in your community and connect with them, just like through Global Ed Con. This is the perfect opportunity for us to learn together. Lucy, that's it. That's all I got.
Okay. I'm going to start recording.